Hello and welcome to the Print Live. Uh, Yesterday, that is early morning on early Wednesday morning, a patrol party of consisting about 12 soldiers from the Indian Army and the ITP was challenged by Chinese soldiers at the LAC in Ladakh. Following this, there was a scuffle that ensued between the two countries, and eventually this scuffle led to a larger reinforcement of soldiers from both sides, and finally the matter was settled late last evening. So the question that the print that we are asking today is, how will spike in Indo-China border tensions affect ties? Now, so please do send in your questions and I'll try and answer as many questions as possible. As far as yesterday's particular incident is concerned, remember that in 2017, this was on August 15, that is on Independence Day, a similar situation had developed around the very same area in which the troops of both China and India, they used stones and iron rods to hit out at each other. Now, there were videos of the scuffle which came out in 2017, and this was a very bad development that took place. But yesterday, what happened yesterday, while it is sad that an incident did happen, there was scuffle between the two sides. I would say that this incident also shows us that the things on the ground, while it is tense, the solution lies, the solution to it comes much faster than before. Remember that this particular incident happened early Wednesday morning, and by late Wednesday night, both sides had disengaged and the soldiers had moved back. So this really means that while tensions do exist, tensions will be there in the future, but the border mechanisms are in place that both the sides can resolve any such disputes that comes about within the shortest span possible, unlike the experiences in the past. So please do send in your questions and I'll try and answer as many questions as possible. I have a question coming in from Vivek, and he's asking, Vivek is generally asking how did the standoff end? This first question was actually whether the standoff ended or not, but now he's quickly sending a question asking, how did it end? Well, as I said, there were border mechanisms in place. What happened was that immediately after the situation developed, there was an alarm bell ringing in the army headquarters here. The army reached out to the Chinese side, based on which there was delegation level talks that was held by both the sides at the brigadier level, and eventually following the meeting between these two officers, one from Indian side and the other from the China, a decision was made to de-escalate. So yes, that is how the situation was diffused. I have a question which is coming in from Ash. Why can't India declare openly China as enemy country and go to WTO to block all Chinese imports into India? Well, China is not an enemy country. I would also not call it a friendly country. Often people keep asking whether which is a bigger threat to India as far as China or Pakistan is concerned. Many people say it is Pakistan. Some of us, including me, would say that China is a bigger threat to India than Pakistan. At the same time, I would not call China an enemy territory. Remember that we have relationship. We have both diplomatic, economic, and military relationship with China. We are part. We've become the part of the Chinese-led the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that is SCO, in 2017. We have exercises, friendly military exercises, both at multilateral and bilateral level that we carry out. But to call China an enemy country would not be really fair. Well, I have a question coming in from Vishal. What does it look like compared to Doklam? Well, Vishal, Doklam was a completely different scenario. Remember, the first biggest difference between Doklam and what happened yesterday was the fact that Doklam is a Bhutanese territory, and what happened yesterday was on the Indian territory which China claims is theirs. So that is the basic difference between Doklam and what happened yesterday. But remember that in Doklam, India went in and challenged the Chinese military who were trying to build a road through this particular area, which is again, remind you, it's a Bhutanese territory. Now, there was a standoff that took place between the two countries. It lasted for about 71 days before both sides decided to withdraw. Now, when I say withdraw, it doesn't mean that both sides went back to their own territory. India has gone back to the position that it held at the particular post that it has in the Bhutanese territory, and China has also stepped back. What is the end result is that China continues to have permanent military structures and permanent soldiers posted in Doklam. So it's something that has taken place long time ago, but it's something which will have a larger impact. Now, both the incidents cannot be compared together. What happened yesterday was a very localized incident. It happened in the morning, but within hours, there were senior military functionaries who spoke to each other, and the situation was diffused rather than letting it really grow out of hand. I have a question coming in from Debasish Mukherjee, who's asking, why is India flexible about China? I think when I was a child, there used to always the story that I was told about when there was a storm, the tree that actually is flexible tends to stand the storm rather than the one which is not flexible. So when it comes to politics, when it comes to international issues, it's always important for a country to be flexible. But flexible doesn't mean to the fact that that we are afraid of China. India is taking a number of steps on the military side to counter the possible threat from China itself. So it won't be completely fair to say that India is being flexible with China. India is like all countries. India has certain issues with China. China too has issues with India. So one can really argue and counter-argue that whether it is China which is flexible or whether India is flexible or not. But remember that whenever you talk about these transgressions that have taken place, recently the Eastern Army Commander, Lieutenant General Naravne, who is now the Vice Chief and who is slated to be the next Army Chief, reminded that every time you hear incidents of Chinese intrusion into Indian territory, remember that India has done the double of that. Now, why I would say is because there's a difference of perception as far as the line of actual control is concerned. So let's say India considers let's say point A as the LAC, as the border. China considers point B as the border. So this is the gap which is there, and both sides continue to patrol into areas where it is perceived to be as where in their perception it is their territory. So yes. So while intrusions do take place by China, remember that similar intrusions does take place into what China calls is the Chinese territory by the Indian forces. Well, Shashank Watamar is asking, does China doing this purposefully, as we are already locked on with China on Kashmir issue and China wants to take advantage? Well, remember that China had issued a very strong statement, and especially it was more upset with the fact that Ladakh has been made into a union territory. So, there are expectations from the security side, from people in the defense are expecting such incidents to have taken place, but to take place in the future also. But this would clearly mean that it has been taken into account that such clashes or such challenges would be there at the LAC. So it has been taken into account. Yes, this is something which can be expected on the LAC, be it in the northeast or be it in the northern borders with China. I have a question coming in from Ash, and he's asking, what do you think India is going to do with G5 technology? And has India decided on that already? Well, India has not decided on that already. The talks are still on, and hence one will really have to wait and see about how things really play out. I have a question coming in from Rahul Verma. Will this benefit Pakistan? Well, what happened yesterday does not really benefit Pakistan. Remember that the situation has been resolved in the quickest time possible. But yes, it's a fact that it benefits Pakistan that India and China doesn't have a cordial relationship. So any issues or any such incidents at the LAC is something that Pakistan would be praying for. So remember that when similar incursions, when similar incidents have happened in the northeast, there was a lot of videos and propaganda that was put out by Pakistani social media handles, which are handled by none other than the Pakistani military itself, and the entire aim is to somehow try and create a wedge between India and China. I have a question from Farzana Latif, who's asking why Northeast less watchdog related to China border problem. I didn't really get your question, but if you're asking why, because the question is why Northeast less watchdog related to China border problem. Well, I didn't really get your question, but for the fact remains that India continues to remain on high alert, both at the northern as well as the eastern borders, especially in the northeast. Remember that next month India would be conducting its maiden massive exercise of the Mountain Strike Corps. This involved about 15,000 personnel from the Indian Army, that is from the Mountain Strike Corps. They would be backed by tanks, gunship helicopters or transport aircraft. As far as building infrastructure in the northeast is concerned, that has been a priority focus of the government previously as well as of this current government. Roads have been built, necessary infrastructure has been put into place. At the same time, you also have the induction. You also have the induction of futuristic systems like the S-400. You will also have the BrahMos being placed in the northeast. This is all to build up as a capability enhancement as far as China is concerned. I have a question which is coming in from Achintya Gomath, and he's asking how will these affect Chinese premium visit? We are also doing army practice in Arunachal Pradesh. Well, Achintya, that's absolutely correct that we are doing an army exercise, a massive army exercise in Arunachal Pradesh. And whether how will this affect the Chinese premier visit? Well, every time the Chinese premier has visited the country, there has been more or less some kind of tension at the LAC. So this time also it is nothing unique. But I remember that one should also focus on the fact that yesterday's incident was resolved in the shortest time possible. This is something that happened in the morning when a patrol of 12 soldiers was challenged by the Pakistani troops. Additional troops were called in. There was a scuffle that took place between the two sides. It could have actually snowballed into a major incident. However, the senior military officers from both China and India spoke to each other and eventually resolved the situation. So what this shows is for the fact that while the LAC continues to be a big challenge as far as India and China are concerned, remember that the good point or the good aspect coming out of it is the fact that the border mechanism that has been put into place by both the countries is actually working. I have a question coming in from Umang Kabra. How do you think opposing CPEC in POK affects our ties with China? Well, the India has consistently maintained that any activity being carried out by any country for that matter in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Remember the word Pakistan occupied Kashmir. It's not a Pakistani territory. It's a territory of Jammu and Kashmir which has been captured by Pakistan. So India is of the consistent view that any economic activity being done by a third country is a violation, and this is exactly what India has said on the CPEC project itself. Remember that the similar concern was raised by the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh during his visit to South Korea too, because there were certain activities being carried out in POK by South Korean companies. So as far as how does it affect our relationship with China? Well, frankly, while all these things have been done more from a diplomatic point of view, more as a posturing is concerned, but as far as the real ties between India and China, these such issues of the CPEC and POK doesn't really affect the ties per se. I have a question on Vishnu Mohan. What about Chinese soldiers in POK? Well, Chinese soldiers in POK is a matter of concern, as is the Chinese activities in POK. But remember that the Chinese soldiers are officially being deployed in POK as part of the CPEC project, is to provide security to the CPEC project. India has objected to the presence of Chinese activities, including the presence of soldiers in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Our question coming in from Okay, I have a question coming in from Rakesh, and he's asking why isn't China settling the border dispute with India? I would only wish if settling a dispute between two countries was as simple. China has already settled, more or less settled his border disputes with Russia. The disputes with Bhutan is also more or less settled. But yes, it's the dispute between India and China is still on. There are some claims that China has, outlandish claims that China has, which has been rejected by India. Both sides are talking to each other, and international disputes, especially with regard to border, would take time. But eventually, what is important is for the fact that these border issues should not escalate into some kind of a major incident. I think that is the focus area, that and that is why you have mechanisms in place. Remember that following the Wuhan summit, both militaries had agreed to ensure that no such escalation really takes place, and hence it is important to see what happened yesterday in the light of the fact that the incident was resolved in less than 24 hours. I have a question coming in from Mohammed Ibn Ali, and he's asking what would be the Indian initiative in case of Chinese escalation. Remember that as I've earlier mentioned, that India is building up its defensive as well as its offensive options along the northern borders, as well as the eastern side. But if you're asking whether China is going to escalate and indulge in a war with India, I'm not seeing such a scenario in the near future, at least. Yes, the tensions are there, but I think more than the military side, there are a lot of other relationship that both countries benefit from each other. And hence, I don't foresee any scenario in which there would be a war between India and China in the near future, especially because of border disputes. Remember that while the border dispute is a major concern, and there have been escalations in the past. Both sides have really fought with each other physically, but remember that not a single bullet has been fired at the LAC for several decades. I have a question coming in from Vishal, and is asking your view on report that Vice President mistakenly leaked photos of nuclear submarine details. Well, Vishal, this is a Q&A based on the Chinese on this latest incident that has happened in Ladakh at the LAC, and this so I'll take your question in case if you're doing a similar round on this particular question that you've asked. I have a question by Shashank, and how well are we equipped on the Chinese border? Well, if you're asking me how well are we equipped, we are not well equipped at all. But yes, steps are being taken. Remember that there are multiple areas in along the LAC which is not motorable. So you really have to carry out long foot patrols to reach particular points along the LAC. Now that has been something that has been worked on. There are tunnels that have been built. The road construction activity along the border road construction activity, especially in the northeast, has been very slow, and this is something that needs to be sped up. As far as equipment is concerned, remember that we are buying the M777 lightweight howitzers. These howitzers will mostly be placed in the eastern sector. It's a weapon. It's a howitzer that can be easily airlifted using a Chinook helicopter that India has already bought. At the same time, you also have the BrahMos that would be deployed have been deployed in the eastern sector. You also have a lot of other changes that are taking place as far as army strategy overall for the northeast and the north is concerned. Well, thank you so much for logging in and sending in your questions. Do log in tomorrow around the same time when I or any of my colleagues would answer the questions on the biggest news of the day. Thank you so much.